Welcome to K11 Konversations, a multi-platform dialogue series where we discuss the intersection between creativity, culture, and innovation, in line with K11's social mission to incubate talent, propagate culture, and push a new frontier of art. In this session today, we have invited artists Chris Huen and Vivien Zhang, who are joining us from London to take us on a dive into their studio-based painting practices. So Vivien, let's start with you. Could I ask you to share a little bit more about yourself and your painting practice? At what point and why did you choose painting?
Hi, Denise. I'm Vivien Zhang and I'm currently in East London. So I started painting, I guess, when I came to university in London. So I came to do my BA degree at the Slade School of Fine Art, UCL, and then I really narrowed down my practice when I started doing my MA course at the Royal College of Art in London. I think when I was a young kid and in school, I always spent more effort and sacrificed more for art. And so it was quite natural for me to try and study painting and fine art in university and higher education. I've lived in London now for almost 14 years. So after graduating, I've just sort of stayed on, did some residencies abroad, and I have a studio in East London.
Fantastic. And I know, so you were born in London and you also spent time in Kenya and Thailand actually prior to settling in London. Have these experiences in your formative years actually translated in your visual expression in painting?
Yeah, actually I was born in Beijing, so I'm from like mainland China. But I moved to Nairobi, Kenya for middle school with my single mom. And then for high school, sort of when I was 14, we moved to Bangkok, Thailand, and I attended international schools there. So these experiences really definitely have influenced the way I work or how I think about my paintings or how I think about the process of painting. So often I like to say that I see the work of art as a site for assemblage where different sources, motifs, or stimulus, around us, visual stimulus come together in the space of a painting. And I think this is largely a result of my experiences, having kind of experienced many different cultures and always stimulated by like different things around me.
Fantastic. Do you want to share a few of your slides and then we can get a sense of these paintings we're talking about?
Absolutely. So this is a view of my studio in East London. In London, a lot of studios are run by organizations or charities. And so I rent a studio from this organization called Beau Arts. I was on the waiting list for my particular studio for 3 years because it was just really, one of those sought after studios. It's like insulated, it's got heating, some of the basic things that you don't think about, in art school, but afterwards you're like, oh gosh, these studios are quite basic. And so to look for the perfect one takes a while. This is a recent painting I did, and it will be showing Art Basel in Switzerland this year. And then I thought it would be good to show some detailed shots of my paintings because I think from afar, a lot of people say my paintings look quite digital. But in actual fact, when you see them close up, there's a lot of mark making, there's a lot of brush marks and texture. This is another recent work that I showed in my solo show in London just this May. And these works are based on a lot of research. So I've been looking at how we map the globe recently. So there's a lot of research around map projections in the last century or centuries. There's another shot in my studio when I have a different group of works. Sorry, the slide is slightly blurry. And then this is how the works move out of the studio into an exhibition space. And I had this show at Tank, Shanghai, during the pandemic, actually. So I was really lucky to be able to still have exhibitions during the pandemic and, work away. I think as a painter, painting is quite a solitary activity. So we were quite happy. I don't know how Chris feels. Maybe he can talk about his experience, but I was really happy just to be alone in my studio and work away.
You really do get that sense of it almost being a digital image from the installation view.
Yeah, I think that's always a point that comes up when people talk to me about my work. And I think it's really an interesting conversation, especially how in this day and age, we are so affected by technology and like digital softwares around us.
And so while we're on this, shall we turn to you, Chris, and learn a bit more about you and your painting practice?
So my name is Chris, and I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and last year I moved here in London and start to work and live here. And I when I graduated and I study in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and talking about my study, and when I was like a really small kid, I always like to draw like a lot of people, and and I mean. Initially, I was, thinking more about like becoming a comic, like Japanese comic. Like because we are in Hong Kong in the 90s, we are heavily influenced by Japanese culture, and the way we draw and we read is basically Japanese manga. And I think when I was like 7, that during a trip to Europe, and then my parents took me to a museum, and then I saw a lot of European classical paintings, and then I started to wonder, like, there is actually more ways to depict or to paint or to draw. So I start to discover more, and then start to think about being like an artist. So when I was in college, actually I thought I would become like an artist doing some, we call it arty art, like installation, the most trendy stuff, or digital art, video art. So I tried to study that, but in the second year I feel really frustrated because the medium, I just can't find a appropriate way to engage with, and also I start to lose myself in the medium and also the art making. So I try to go back to the starting point, why I'm interested in art, what get me inspired. So I decided to focus on painting mainly, to continue through my graduation, and then after that I also realized I can do this like for the rest of my life, and try to explore the like the things I can do with paintings.
Do you have a favorite painter?
Favorite painter, like a lot. like usually it's like in my mind it's always like a race, like some artists will become like top of the line, and then after a period of time they will change. But when I was studying, I was mainly focused on a group of British painter like Lucien Foyle or Francis Bacon. And but recently I actually quite inspired by Giorgio Morandi, like just the the still life, the pot or the bottle. Because I think I mean his picture is always very inviting, but recently I start to think this guy actually experienced two very important war, you know, in the main theater in Europe, and this guy is, you know, throughout his life or career is still painting the same thing, really calm, really powerful. I mean, like during this like difficult time and thinking about our situation now is war, now is like pandemic, a lot of things, and it gives me like a sense of, you know, it's kind of like a very good example for us how to deal with the situation we're living in.
Quite rightly. I mean, Vivien mentioned she's been enjoying that solitude that has been forced on us through this unfortunate situation with the pandemic. Chris, has that actually been the same for you as well? Have you found yourself enjoying that time as painter, spending the hours in your studio by yourself?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I mean, I think we, or at least for me, I'm really fortunate because like the nature of our work didn't, I mean, maybe the supply become a bit pricier, but I mean, for the most of the time, we still keep, you know, leading our life normally, didn't affected by the pandemic or things like that.
You know, the last time we met was actually still in Hong Kong, at your studio inside an industrial building. And I remember still very clearly the food, the smell of dog food.
Yeah.
This is a manufacturer next door. So I've always been meaning to ask you, you know, since moving to London, have you felt there's been changes in your painting?
I think definitely some of the aspect have changed, and but for the most part, I feel like I want to take it slowly, and I didn't. Yeah, like before my move, I keep reminding myself not to think about what could be changed or what could be done to reflect my move or the change of environment, because I want to take it naturally and take it slowly. And I've been living in Hong Kong for 30 years, basically the 99% of my life so far. And I feel like I'm here now, I'm still pretty much the same person you met in Hong Kong. So I feel like um, I think I'm more looking forward to seeing the change rather than um, try to pinpoint the change at this moment. Yeah.
Do you want to run us through a few of your paintings? I know you've given us a selection that covers also some over the last 2 or so years of paintings.
Yeah, sure. As you can see, my works are mostly about daily life, and you will see a lot of the characters, my dogs, my family's member, keep repeating in a picture. And also these are also from the environment, some places I visit a lot during my days, and usually my works are quite large, and
Do you do any underdrawing or underpainting?
no, I start directly on the canvas mostly, and it is because I want to capture that spontaneous response, because it is about daily life, but it is also about our senses and how we perceive the world around us. And I want to depict not only the object or the physical environment, but also I want to depict the experience we had when we seeing things. And recently I discovered that actually I was thinking about a lot about the idea of daily life, and the most important thing for me is actually about the ordinariness of our daily life, because in daily life we have a lot of things, we have a lot of events, we have a lot of special moments, but in my work it is not about things that grab our attention, but usually it is things that escape our mind. The and you will see a lot of in my work there is some form of figurative, and also mixed with some form of abstraction, and also there is quite a lot of blank spaces in the work. And this is actually, I think painting is more about our sight, because most of the time painting are meant to be, we make paintings that meant to be seen. So it is directly related to our sight. And I feel like I need to find a way to translate the experience when we are seeing things. And it is and recently I also be very interested in the idea of Edmund Husserl or Husserl, his idea of horizon. And there's a lot of things in our life we pay attention to that appears more detailed, but also something we skipped, and also about Hussein's idea about the horizon is also something that we don't even have the idea, which is like when we talking to kids, and then we try to explain things to them, then they don't even have the idea or the concept of certain things, and then they will keep asking what it is, and then you answer them, they will keep asking, and if an idea is absent from your mind or from your database, and then you will not seeing it, even though physically or optically you see things, but in your mind you don't see it.
That's
So
very true.
yeah, so that's why I feels like in the picture the blank spaces is so important, because it represent those things in our daily life.
But yeah, Vivian, I really wanted to return to your paintings as well, because now that I've seen also Chris's, and we've talked a bit about observation and what we see and what we feel, how we respond. I also want to go a bit deeper into your paintings, which of course we started looking at that sense of the digital, but it's also an illusion. Some of your paintings, unfortunately, I've only been able to see them as a JPEG. I wish I could see them in real life, but already I get this sense that you create this illusion of something that is not there in a way. That notion of the assemblage, I feel like I'm seeing, how do I explain it? Like canvas that's peeling off, for example, something, a layer that's peeling off, but actually it's painted on. What interests you to create these layers, and how do you do it? Like Chris mentioned, he doesn't necessarily do underpainting and works quite directly. How does your process differ?
That's a really interesting question, Denise. I think with painting, it is the medium that has, firstly, so much history and tradition. But secondly, also, people have to remember that painting is paint on canvas, on fabric, on a flat surface. So in a way, this limitation, I think, gives artists or painters the most versatility, the most flexibility to play with illusion, right? So if, for example, I'm interested in technology, I'm interested in the way that or at least I perceive depth, or my understanding of the notion of depth, then I can actually do it with painting a flat surface, maybe to make the strongest argument. So to elaborate a little bit more, the way I think about my paintings and think about space, I think it's symptomatic of our generation, where we are so much of a digital generation. We're so much affected by how screens are layered on top of each other on our phones, on our computer screens. So as opposed to thinking about depth in a traditional sense, like foreground, background, I'm thinking about depth just in terms of layers. And I think having a separate layer already creates depth. And on the flat surface of the painting, that argument can almost be pushed to the furthest extent, because you have this contradiction, right? You're creating depth within a very linear surface, a very flat surface. And so sometimes people actually, they talk to me and they think, oh, your work from afar looks really digital. Have you thought about creating augmented reality or virtual reality? And I think that's not quite the point. I think the point is actually to highlight the contradiction of, like, you're seeing a flat object, but then you're seeing maybe this trompe-l'oeil effect or the illusion of something. Especially, I'm quite a selfish artist. I want people to see the work in real life. So I make a point of, like, using, watery paint, for example, in this painting, or like really thick paint, so that when they see the work in reality, they get a different experience. And I think that's super important, because right now we are consuming information at such a high speed online. And I think it's really unnatural. And I think to look at a work of art, you need to go into the physical space. You need to move with the painting, move with a brush mark, or sit still with a brush mark. I think a painting has different speeds. When we are making the work, sometimes you have a really aggressive brush mark, and sometimes you sit in a chair for 3 hours to trying to like figure something out. And that energy is conveyed through the medium, but you don't really get to see that on the screen. So I think it's really important to see the work in real life, and hence I make a point of adding texture in my work, retaining the brush marks in my work. So then people, for example, in this work, so then people, when they see the work in real life, they're like, wow, this is so different. It's not like I composed in Photoshop or something. However, because also I do admit that I am a digital native. I grew up, in middle school, editing the school yearbook using Photoshop since I was like 11. So I also feel like the way I think about composition or layers is affected by the software. But then I think as an artist, we have the room to negotiate how much we use or not use the digital technology, and ask what is the relationship between the digital technology and making something physical, very physical in the studio.
Vivien, with you, you mentioned being a digital native or considering yourself as a digital native. To me, that means, I am sort of one too myself, and I consider that us growing up with consuming pixels throughout our lives, for our formative years. And Chris, I also wonder if you agree with that for yourself, whether you've also grown up in this culture of pixelated everything. But Vivien, I wonder if that also, whether or not that has an influence on your decision to go into painting, or whether the tactility of paint versus, looking at colors through pixels has had an impact at all.
For sure, it's the medium of paint that has kept me painting. I think when you're mixing paint with a little bit of oil, linseed oil, stand oil, liquid, like that tactility is so different, and you're feeling it. And also when you're working on a canvas, the amount of things you can do with paint is incredible. And to be honest, like, technology has not achieved that. So perhaps is a shortcoming of technology at the moment. And that's why artists are still using the physical medium. But I think it's not that. The painting medium has this history. And when we're painting, we want to have this dialogue with history, a dialogue with people who made paintings 2 years ago, 20 years ago, 200 years ago, right? And to be away from the screen is actually really satisfying. So sometimes if I'm on the screen for so long, I feel like I'm thinking with the back of my head. I have this like feeling I'm not seeing things in front of me really. And so my studio doesn't have very stable Wi-Fi, which is a really good thing, because I'm not on my laptop all the time. And so I can engage with really what is in front of me. And I think that's really important. And maybe a lot of people also felt that during a pandemic, even though they're not artists, right? You are like very focused on what is in front of you, the present. And I think working with physical medium just kind of reminds people of that. And also another thing is when I go to an exhibition and see works in the flesh, last weekend I went to see Lubaina Hamid in Tate Modern. I come out of that show feeling energized because I've seen like the way she handles paint. I see the physicality of the paint. I'm like, I need to get to the studio. I'm so like, oh, this is great. I never get that from looking at pixels with images online.
It's motivating.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's almost like you can see a trace of someone's movement and the kind of time and energy and physicality they've spent with the material. And I see that, and then I can be inspired by that. But I don't get that if you're seeing a digital image because it is so flat.
Thank you, Vivien. I'm aware that we have to wrap up soon. So Chris, I really want to ask you essentially the same question in that, what is so special about the practice of painting that you are drawn to it again and again? Is it again that the irreplaceable feeling of standing in front of a painting that we walk away so excited to go back to the studio? How do you feel about this urgency, this pressure that we're receiving to turn digital?
So when you're talking about this, and I certainly think about a joke or things we always laugh about is that people always look at Mark Rothko's painting in picture or digitally and then think they can do that, or maybe it's just a wallpaper, but I remember when the first time I saw Mark Rothko paintings, and I spent, say, half an hour sitting in front of it and just looking at it, and also let my thought escape. I was sitting in front of the painting, but I'm thinking other stuff, and also, I think it showed the importance of the physical painting that gives you a situation that you can think, not just look and then being feed. And also talking about digital, I think apart from technology, I think digital is also more about a way of thinking. And because we always talk about digital is like 1 0 1 0, and then it is like a kind of like a binary system, and then it's like you ask a question and then it is yes and no, and then if yes and then it's this, if no it's this. Okay, so it is like a mechanism of engage and disengage. But I feel like in the physical world, or in the world we live in, we actually have a lot of different belief systems. So sometimes when you do painting, and it is not like digital that you put on this color in here and then it definitely mean something. It could mean nothing, or it could mean something you never think of. So I think this is the more important things about keeping the studio practice, because we allowed ourselves to have a lot of unanswered question, and then we can keep tackle, and we can keep get ourselves inspired by the uncertain.
Thank you so much, Chris. I think it's great to hear that, as we move faster into a digitally driven world, it doesn't mean that everything must be replaced. And it's really great to hear both of your thoughts about why to this day you still are very strongly choosing painting and choosing the studio practice. So thank you both for your time today. Thank you to K11 for having us. For more K11 conversations on topics of creativity, culture, and innovation, I ask everybody to follow K11 MUSEA's social channels for the latest updates. But that's it for now. Thanks for listening.